what's up?
Shane, how you doing? It's great to see you.
Doing well. We're going to start the video here, buddy, of this final round, and it's right when the players made the turn. Max Homa's on the line. Max played in the U.S. Open here at Merion back in 2013, and we were just talking a little bit about the golf course. You look at the scorecard, you look at the yardage, you see all these pros come in, and you feel like they're going to rip this place apart. You know, you're basically the voice of Merion, for better or worse, and you're a guy that's played so many rounds there. Why was Merion so difficult this week, even with all the rain you guys had early in that week?
Well, I think the most important thing in preparing the golf course for the championship was to make sure that, sounds a little cliche, but make sure that the good shots ended up in the good spots and the bad shots ended up in the bad spots. And I think that's not unique to Merion, but we really worked hard to make sure that that happened. And the other thing that we were hopeful to require the players to do is to drive the ball in the fairway. And that doesn't happen necessarily week to week where it's that penal, but at Merion it is. And we did get a little rain in the beginning of the week, and that was a little troublesome. But about a day and a half, by Friday midday, the golf course was really in great condition. And certainly over the weekend, it turned out to play exactly the way the USGA and the club wanted it to play. So, we think that by requiring the players to drive the ball in the fairway, to put it in the right position, that the beauty of the design came out, and it did. And of course, the greens are very difficult, and I think generally speaking, we required good shots to be hit, and we penalized bad shots.
I'm gonna hit play, and we'll get into as you guys see here. Turn the volume of this thing down just a hair. This is at 10, so this really the kind of the shot for Phil to get him back into this U.S. Open.
Yeah, it's what was interesting about that shot, Shane, is that if he had been 6 inches one way or the other, he might not have been able to get the ball in the green. He drew a very good lie by missing that fairway, and that's a very short hole, and it's not a fairway you should miss. Kind of like Phil missed the first fairway as well. I mean, the first fairway was about 42 yards wide, and he was hitting an iron off the tee. So, I felt that it was certainly great because Phil's a great champion, but, he was very fortunate there to be able to make two on that hole.
Buddy, do you, speaking of missing the ninth fairway, or the 10th fairway, I missed that fairway, I think, 2 times. One of the charms I thought to Merion, and I'm curious if you could speak on this, was trying to find what the middle of the fairway was off the tee. I thought that it was very tricky. You have a lot of tee shots that you kind of have a bit of the fairways blind at 10 and 11. 10's not blind, but 10 I think was a little awkward of a tee shot. 11 is blind. Do you find that to be one of the main reasons this golf course seems to be revered by so many people, and why it does seem to be, especially in this U.S. Open, so difficult to find a bunch of fairways?
Well, Max, it's nice to see you. I think what happens in Merion is it's all about the angles. If you're going to hit it a certain distance, you have a different angle than if you're going to hit it farther. So you're basically driving in most of the fairways on a 45-degree angle, or maybe not that severe, but at 240 yards, there's one line, and at 280 yards, there's another line, and at 300 yards, there's another line. And some of those tee shots are over little hills and valleys, so you're not necessarily comfortable as exactly what line you should take, and I think that is part of the charm of the golf course, and it does make driving the ball in the fairway very difficult.
Buddy, if you could, just for anybody watching that doesn't know why, could you just explain the wicker baskets to people that might not understand why they're wicker and not flag sticks?
I just think that that's kind of a wise tale, but basically they're patterned after the farmers over in Scotland who used to tie their lunch on top of their staff for the sheep. It's nothing more or less than that. It was just something that was brought over, and I don't think there's any more to it. It's just There are a lot of wise tales, but that's basically what it was patterned after.
What's the best
very
bounce you've ever
golfy
seen?
story.
Yeah, that is a golfing story. What's the best wicker basket bounce you've ever seen? Have you ever seen one hit down into the hole?
I've never seen one hit down in the hole, but I have seen one stick in the hole or
What's
stick in
the
the
rule?
wicker. Well, the unwritten rule is that if it sticks in the wicker, you get to put it down on the lip of the cup. But
I like that.
yeah, I think
do
you.
it too.
I'm not sure it would serve you well to stand there and try to line it into the wicker just so that would happen.
If I was
I
that
think
good,
you're
I'd
gonna miss
just
it.
try to hit the green.
I think you're going to miss it more often than you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I gotta ask, you guys backed up the tee on 14 onto the putting green for this tournament. First of all, as someone who had never played in a PGA Tour event, let alone a major before, that was pretty shocking to be allowed to hit a golf ball with spikes on off of a putting green. But I just wondered what maniacal person decided to do that, because that was like 490 yards straight up the hill in front of everyone who was warming up to putt. That was the other part. As a 22-year-old who didn't know anybody, that was the most intimidating shot ever.
Well, you figured it out, Max. That's exactly what we were doing. But no, that teeing ground was we teed off that teeing ground in the 2009 Walker Cup, and the USGA used that kind of as an experiment to see if it would enhance that 14th hole, which is a beautiful little dogleg up the hill to the left with the fairway sloping to the right. When Mike Davis came in to do the Open, we expanded the putting green because for the Walker Cup, that hole played about 470, maybe 465 yards, and Mike wanted to move it back. So we went through the exercise of rebuilding that putting green and expanding it back about 25 to 28 yards. And Max, you're right. The hole was 496 from the very back of the hole. But as luck would have it, Mike only used that once. So we went through a lot of effort, and we have since removed that. And if we're fortunate enough to play a championship there again, an Open championship, you will be teeing off the putting green, Max. I hope you're there when it happens, but it won't be quite as far back. It'll probably be more like the 465 spot. And it will be helpful to have spikes because it gets a little slippery on that putting green.
It gets a little slippery. Yeah, you don't want to fall in front of everybody.
No. That's part of
that. You just saw this approach by Rose was just, I mean, again, we talked about his stats and what he did throughout the year headed into this U.S. Open, and kind of defined his season really. I mean, that was a controlled shot in there and hits it to a foot. And as we'll watch as this thing unfolds, I mean, birdies, Max, all week had to feel like you were picking up a shot and a half on the field.
Yeah, you didn't have a lot of chances coming in other than 12 and 13. At least that's what it felt like to me. 14 through 18 were probably still my favorite finishing stretch of golf, just as far as difficulty goes. I thought that it was incredibly demanding. We just talked about 14. 15 was a nightmare of a tee shot and a nightmare of a green. 16, one of the coolest shortish par fours I played, and then 17, 18, just complete brutes. So you kind of had to get something going on 12 or 13, because you have a couple greens that are quite a bit more receptive, or at least lend themselves to birdies a little bit more, because you're not going to make a whole lot after that.
Yeah, and I think that's really the beauty of the golf course, Max. They're kind of three sections to the golf course. You kind of go out, and it's not too well. For the Open, it wasn't quite this way, but for normal play, it's not too rigorous going right out. Then in the middle, it gets a little more challenging, and then at the end, it gets very challenging.
Yeah, 5, 6 were like where the golf course turns. 1 through 4, not so bad. 5, 6, you get punched a little bit. And
Right.
You hope to get to 10, without giving up too many strokes, and then you only had a few holes until you had to, put the face guard back on.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the neat things about the golf course is that it does it gives you a lot of looks, and you're never quite sure what's coming. But you've got to come back, Max, and see it now. You know, Gil did a restoration. We were closed for 18 months, and we'll get Shane and you up there and take a look at it now. You won't believe it. It's spectacular, and hopefully we'll get another championship back. But I think you're absolutely right. When you cross the road and play 13, you get a little bit of a breather there. And if you remember, Rose played 12 and 13. He birdied those 2 holes in the final round where Phil had made the bogey on 13. But I went back and looked, and I think Duffner was the only person. I mean, Duffner made 6 birdies in the final round. He made a 7 on the 15th hole to take him out of the championship. But other than that, I didn't. And Rose made 5 in the last round birdies. But other than that, I didn't see anybody who had made more than 4 or 5 birdies in any one round. It may have happened, but I didn't see it.
It's an awesome golf course, buddy, and we appreciate you joining us and taking the time, just giving us kind of a look into the golf course, a look into Merion, and we will check in with you at some point. A guy that, if there's a man out there that knows about USGA stuff, it's Buddy Marucci. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it, buddy.
Well, Shane, it's great to see you again. Max, take care of yourself. All the best when the season starts again. And
Thank you.
I really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you. And we're looking forward to seeing some golf soon.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sounds good.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye-bye.